Tell them what a divorce coach is.
I work with people in advance of starting a separation or a divorce. I think people think, oh, we're splitting up. It's both of us want to do this. We no longer want to be married. I'm just going to, immediately just jumpstart my new life. I think people are really surprised when they come up against feelings of sadness about it, grief, and sometimes even shame. The divorce process has you questioning sometimes your worth, right? What your value is and what you're worthy of, and sometimes what you're capable of.
What have you heard is the most unhelpful thing that a best friend can say to their friend who's going through a divorce? What advice do you have, or what do you want them to hear or know about these early stages?
We don't negotiate anything about money if we don't know anything about money. Any decision you make during the negotiation process, you should put through what I call the 5-5-5 rule, which is...
Hi everyone, today I'm joined by Alex Beattie. So she's the founder of The Divorce Planner. Alex's work has been featured in the New York Times and Real Simple, and she's currently writing The Divorce Planner's Ultimate Divorce Prep Guide. Welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Kim. I'm excited to be here.
Well, first, for people who don't know, tell them what a divorce coach is.
Oh, that's a great first question. So I am very specific in that I'm a divorce prep coach. So I work with people in advance of starting a separation or a divorce. So they really understand what their goals and priorities are. They have all the administrative stuff necessary in hand before booking a consultation with a divorce attorney or a mediator. And they've done financial planning. All of those steps really empower people not only to go into those consultations armed with specific questions that they're going to get answers to about their situation, but really activate them to become their own best advocate during the process. There's a huge emotional component to the business and legal side of a divorce. So making sure that you kind of have given yourself some time to prepare for that so you don't have big emotions making decisions is the name of the game.
Yeah, what an important aspect. It's such an emotional time. And a lot of times I talk to clients all the time where they're like, we're going through the separation and I don't care. I'm just going to give them the house. I just want it to be over with. So when we make these decisions from emotional places, this is where having a coach could really help.
You just hit the nail on the head. That's one of the biggest things where I have people who just want to bury their head in the sand because they're so emotionally overwhelmed by not just the divorce process itself, but what it means. I mean, it's really the end of a chapter of your life, but it kind of leaves you looking at this new landscape, your future, in a completely different way. It's a blank slate, and that can be really intimidating when you have had this idea that you were going to be on a path or your life was going to look a certain way. It's a real opportunity for deep introspection, and you really have to be, again, aligned in what your goals are and have an idea of what that future looks like so you know what you're building towards.
Yeah, I'm curious, what drew you to the work?
Oh my gosh, personal experience. So it started with my own divorce, and I have a background in big project management. And so I wasn't sure which way the wind was going to blow. Was I going to stay with my spouse of the time, or were we going to head for a divorce? But like most long-term marriages, there's usually a couple of years where you're in that position. I have a lot of clients who are in that same position who come to me. And so I decided to really throw my focus into what was in my control. And that was doing exactly what we're talking about, which is getting prepared for consultations so I could get more information and doing financial planning, understanding what it costs to live my life, whether it was every month or for the year, as well as figure out what my kids, how to help them with the transition and what a parenting plan might look like. And also think about what my future is going to look like. So it was all kind of the groundwork that led me to becoming a divorce prep coach. Because as you know, once you have a big life experience like this, then you have friends and family and colleagues who come to you for peer-to-peer kind of advice. And so it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, and you're really talking about the practical aspect of what's the roadmap going forward, even though you don't want to do it. And it's horribly gutting and painful and your life's completely turned upside down. There's a practical aspect to, like you said, financial stuff. Most people haven't even touched on that.
And that is one of the biggest, scariest parts of the divorce process. You can be as resolute and amicable going into the idea of it, and then money equals feelings, right? Money equals security, money equals future. So when it feels like that part of your life is out of your control because you're going to be divvying up assets, or perhaps there was a big income inequity, and then, you're looking at, wait a minute, how am I going to go from either a income household or a one income household to maybe I have to get a job for the first time in a really long time because I've been doing work that supports the other breadwinner? It's really daunting. And the only way you can really tackle those fears and anxiety is with facts.
Right. Oh, good point. Yeah, there's some objective truth here that we can use some evidence, some reasonable planning, and make it a practical process as well as the emotional.
I was convinced I was going to live in a shopping cart after, like, that was before the practical planning, and even sometimes after, because that's how emotionally connected and charged this whole process can be. And that's why, when you kind of lift the rug and see all the creepy crawlies, then you can make a plan, right? Then it's not so scary because your imagination isn't keeping you up at 3 o'clock, every morning, waking you up from a deep slumber, counting all the beans and trying to figure it out and telling you the worst case scenario.
Yeah. What do you think you underestimated the most about how painful divorce can be?
Oh gosh, that is a really great question. I think the biggest thing that I underestimated, and then I see this with clients as well, is even if you know that this is the right decision for you, it's still going to bring up a lot of big emotions. And I think people think, especially if, like, oh, we're splitting up. It's both of us want to do this. We no longer want to be married. I'm just going to, immediately just jumpstart my new life. Well, you're really winding something down. And as I said, I think people are really surprised when they come up against feelings of sadness about it, grief, and sometimes even shame. We've talked about those before. I think those are the biggest ones. And they can be linked not only to the relationship that you're ending in divorce, but they can take you back to childhood even, and some patterns, or some narratives that were ingrained in you that have reared their ugly head during this relationship dynamic with this person you're no longer going to be married to. And it really can catch you off guard. It can really feel like a big undertow of emotional, turmoil.
Yeah, you mentioned childhood, which is my favorite word. So I'm going to take that opening. Yeah, I find that with anything in life that's challenging, our ability to handle it, our resilience in handling it will always tie back to childhood and how we approach conflict, how we see ourselves as capable or not. Even procrastinating, like that's a big theme in my content right now, is like putting things off. And then to have that all unfold when you least expect it, like that thing in childhood happened years ago. Why would I be affected now? This is my current life. So such an interesting point.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that, one of my favorite sayings is, if the wound is deep, you will heal many times. And so, when you find yourself up against, wait a minute, I thought I got over this. I'm, full blown adult. I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, beyond. Why is this coming up for me now that I'm going through a divorce? It's because we tend to repeat patterns, right? Even if we're not really conscious of it. So it's about kind of like cutting through um, the clutter of what's going on outside, and really, again, doing the work on the inside, which, by the way, people can be really mad that, that these feelings are coming up, and it's not just easy, or they can push them down. I'm always talking about being mindful of not trying to cover up those big feelings, whether it's too much booze, food, online shopping, doom scrolling, whatever it is, to try to numb out, because you're just delaying, the reckoning that you're eventually going to have if you want to grow, right? If you want to grow, if you really want to reconnect with who you are now at this point in your life, not just so that you can have potentially a healthy partnership with somebody else later, but more importantly, have a healthy partnership with yourself.
Yeah, it's such a good point that you do. It really forces you to reevaluate your relationship with yourself. Even if you don't evaluate it consciously, it's playing out your relationship with yourself. You mentioned that you were worried that you'd be homeless, living on the street.
Yeah.
I imagine that really shook your confidence. And I think no matter, I talk to people from all ages, all social
Mhm.
classes, we'll say, walks of life, where no matter who you are, how successful and resilient you are on paper, divorce shakes your confidence.
Yeah.
What's your experience with that?
I think that, whether it was my own experience or through the clients that I've worked with, especially if I'm working with my stay-at-home parents, my stay-at-home moms primarily, the divorce process has you questioning sometimes your worth, right? What your value is and what you're worthy of, and sometimes what you're capable of. So being able to take time to prepare again in advance of starting the process, even in that financial planning or when you're doing that introspection and thinking about like, who am I now? What brings me joy? How do I want to spend my time? I know the practicals, like I have to make money, but if you are starting from scratch, as I said, like perhaps a stay at home parent has been, it can feel really daunting to get out there again. How am I going to do this? Where's my value? And so I like to remind people and work with people on, even if for that example of a stay-at-home parent, you've been a project manager, you've been dealing with, multiple scheduling, and you have been dealing with usually budget, of household budget and stuff. It's just about reframing, what you have access to skill-wise and where your value is, and then believing yourself. It's so easy, especially when you're going through a divorce, to kind of challenge your own sense of worth, to let this narrative creep in of I'm not worthy of love, or the things never work out for me, or I'll never have the right partner. Again, that can be really linked to earlier childhood or young adult experiences you've had. And it's really about retraining your brain to realize that you have just as much, value and worth for all of these things that you want, but also that you need to tell yourself that story to replace the other story. Those little cognitive brain tips and tricks that you and I are always talking about really come into play. But because you're going through kind of a period in your life that can feel extremely isolating, you might not be aware of, like, that little voice is doing more harm than good. You just take it at face value instead of challenging it.
Yeah, I really promote that as well, is growth is ridiculously uncomfortable. It's horrible. People like to paint growth and personal growth as just this wonderful, you know, journey, and that's just not the way it is, because we get into these patterns that are comfortable because they're protective. And I love what you're saying about challenge yourself. It's not gonna be
Mhm.
comfortable. It's gonna be new. It's gonna fly in the face of old narratives, and a really important point. Now, the challenge is, okay, I know that sounds good on paper. What did you find most helpful in retraining your brain, and with clients, what do you find helpful?
That is the million-dollar question, right? And the big headline there is first having an awareness, right? That, wait, I don't feel good. And I also don't like these stories I'm telling myself. I don't like this heaviness or this picture of myself I'm painting. So number one, letting yourself be aware of it, questioning it a little bit. And then really kind of incorporating everything you can in your life to help you build calm, to help you build resilience, and to help you build strength. And, that can be the things that we're always talking about, which can come from practicing gratitude, which might sound ridiculous when you're going through a big life challenge. I actually offer anybody who goes to my website, I have a free gratitude journal you can download, but it's scientifically proven if you practice gratitude every day, it starts that mental shift in you and it brings in a different kind of energy to how you're seeing the world. Journaling is another big one. And even for my people out there who are like, I'm not going to write my feelings down. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Even an exercise as simple as writing a letter from your future self to to kind of document what does my life look like and what do I want to be doing? Just to have it on paper, that old fashioned. And if you're doing it in your notes on your phone, that's fine too. But actually, by kind of like either speaking it or writing it, you're creating a space for it, something for you to look forward to, right? And when you're looking forward to something, that brings you hope. But it's also as simple as making sure you're exercising, getting out into nature, experiencing awe. Volunteering is a huge thing, becoming a part of community. Therapy, right? Working with a therapist is really important during this time if you have means. If you don't, there are lots of low and no cost alternatives. So I encourage everyone to explore what that could mean. And if you really feel like I don't even have somewhere to explore, go to your local librarian. Go to your local librarian. They're like real life Google for you though, but they're working for you. So all of those things really help. As I said, give you a stability during a time that can feel really unstable.
Yeah, that's a really all-encompassing list ranging from, the internal mental to the behavioral, like just walk yourself to a library. But I loved the first step about having awareness about what's going on. Otherwise, you can say, "Oh, I'm fine. No, I wanted the divorce. Everything's great." And then it'll just sit there percolating and take over when you least expect it.
It's true, and I think I think there's still a stigma attached to divorce, as ridiculous as that might sound in 2026, whether it's familial, something that you picked up, or perhaps it's cultural or, what have you, spiritual in what way, and that can sometimes seep into us, right? So that further kind of makes you feel like, "I can't share," or "People don't wanna hear about this." Your people wanna be there for you too, you know? And I think remembering that to treat yourself the way you would want your closest friends to treat themselves and to come to you with things, just remembering that that's an okay thing. We're supposed to be connected. We're supposed to be going through these big challenges in life. I love to say, like, people lose jobs, people get sick, and sometimes relationships end. These are the norm, right? This is normal. This idea we've been sold that if your life has any bumps whatsoever, you're doing something wrong. That's what's actually wrong. Life is about challenges and it's about navigating them in a way that aligns with your real core values, right? And so you're constantly learning. And you're also, if you're a parent, you're modeling how to get through those tough times. So it's like you want to be able to give yourself kindness as much as possible and connection.
Yeah, the biggest thing I hear from parents is not necessarily themselves or even their spouse. It's like, "Am I messing up my kid,
Yeah.
my children?" And it's just, it should be part of the conversation, should be part of the equation, but it's not always a set answer one way or the other. But
Mhm.
you really highlight the importance of what your community is gonna do, what your support system is going to do. Going through divorce is not a solo process. Now you can offer the practical steps and all that, but you're going to have someone in your ear, you're going to have cultural beliefs in your ear.
Mhm.
Like the divorce rate in India is insane. It's like 1% or 50 years ago, it was like 0.5%.
Yeah.
Now, can we say that 99% of marriages in India are, rainbows and unicorns? Maybe not. But culturally, it's just such a stigma. I know when I was growing up, my parents were very conservative Christians and divorce was a no-no. They
Mhm.
for sure did not support my sister when she got divorced. So for
Mhm.
very religious reasons. So we have to also, in order, navigate our relationship with ourselves, what I'm hearing from you is also, what is your support saying? 'Cause we can be swayed. So, what have you heard, like, is the most unhelpful thing that a best friend can say to their friend who's
Yeah.
going through a divorce?
I love this question, and there are multiple answers. First of all, I never liked them.
Ah, everything comes out.
Yeah, exactly. I always like to tell clients or put content out on social media of the different reactions you're gonna get, and, kind of the headline of this is when you know what your goals and priorities are and when you feel centered with yourself, you can withstand the opinions of others, right? You can kind of be able to deflect. But when you don't, it's really easy to absorb them, really, even in a way that you're internally suffering instead of even acting on it, feeling judged and compounding that, self-worth stuff. But some of the most common ones are, I never liked them. Did you try everything? Like, that's the one that kills me, right? Because yes, most people have tried everything. And what you have to remember is people are coming to your news through their own lens, right? We can't help it. We can't help but put situations that make us feel uncomfortable through our own little meat grinder of how will this affect me? Am I in danger? Am I going to be infected? There's also the other reaction, which is just staying away from you because they don't know what to say. Like, there's still a lot of people who were raised with an idea of you just don't talk about it, and that can be just as harmful. But again, when you have done the work to kind of center yourself and you're giving yourself the support you need, it makes it a lot easier to navigate that. I would just say, before even sharing the news, one thing to do is to kind of give people a heads up so they can process the initial shock of it, because it usually is. Sometimes, even if you see the writing on the wall for another person, it's still like, oh, wow, this is happening. So by sending a heads up, whether it's a text or, an email or a DM, just saying, hey, just wanted to let you know in advance of us sitting down, this is what's going on with me. And I wanted to give you a beat to process it before we see each other. That can help people kind of take time, to sit with it a little bit, as opposed to you putting somebody on the spot. And sometimes people just say the wrong thing when you do that.
Yeah, it's such a really good point about the lens that people are going to hear your news
Yeah.
through their own lens. And I've had countless people tell me how they broke up, maybe divorced, and their sibling or their parent all of a sudden said, "No, you can't stay here. You need to stay there and work it out," and just abandoned for a period of time all support,
Mhm.
seemingly. And you're right. People get very agitated, very triggered, very activated when something like a structure. This is, you two are a couple. You are a couple in my life. If you two are no longer a couple, my world is a little bit affected, a lot
You're
affected.
hitting on Yeah, you're hitting on something that, even transcends divorce, but it is a part of the divorce, is when things happen when that challenge these ideas that we've set for ourselves that are absolutes, or when you have an expectation, rather, of what something's supposed to look like and it doesn't. It can trigger, you denying it, right? Trying to push it away, trying to insert, energy into making it the way you want it. And we know that that doesn't work, right? Anytime we're clinging to this idea of an expectation of certainty that we see is when you're going to come up against real problems. And I think it part of that factor is people are really uncomfortable being uncomfortable. People are very uncomfortable with uncertainty. But as I said earlier, that's really the name of the game of life. As humans, we tend to crave, right? We want knowns in our life. And yet, this experience that we're going through, these lives that we're living, are filled with lots of unknowns, which goes back to when you have kind of given yourself that great foundation, you can weather those storms, and in a lot better way. But also having the awareness of, unfortunately, if you're coming up against a situation where somebody's denying, what's happening to you, or they're being really rigid about it, understanding that's not your burden to carry, even though it's really hard when you're feeling incredibly vulnerable and it feels very judgmental. That's not your burden.
Yeah, and it's important to have permission
Yeah.
to identify that, that
Mhm.
it's not your burden. So we talked a little bit about, unhelpful things. What do you find is helpful if, people are shocked with the news of, oh, my friend is going through a divorce? What are things they can do? Have you noticed?
excellent question. I think the first thing is just create space for your friends just listen more than anything, right? That wonderful, hopefully practice that many of us are much more aware of these days, which is by asking, do you want me to listen or do you want me to offer help? Asking before offering an unsolicited opinion, right, is really important, but just starting with creating a safe space where somebody can feel heard is a big deal and feel safe is a big deal. When we were talking earlier about kind of the financial planning and the fear and all of that, if you know that you have a friend who's going to be going through a little bit of a big financial change and offering ways to kind of make it easy without asking. Sometimes when we go through big, things in life, big experiences, people are like, let me know what I can do. Instead of asking, if you have a friend who maybe is not going to have access to any childcare, offer to babysit once in a while, right? Or, have them over for dinner or bring a lasagna so that they can put it into the freezer. But more than anything, you know, I love to say that even though we were talking about different reactions to expect from people, more often than not, people want to be there for you. And that's the beauty of opening up and being vulnerable, and you should let them.
Yeah, that's a great point at the end that you should let them because a lot of people have trouble receiving in general. So this will lead to a lot of isolation, and I don't wanna burden them. I do have I wish I could talk to my friend, but they're busy with their kids, and
Mhm.
so being able to take space, so to speak, really important,
Yeah.
get the support you need.
Yeah, and remembering to treat yourself the way, you would want your friend to behave if the shoe was on the other foot, right? I think we always forget, like, this idea of I don't wanna burden anybody or I should be strong enough to do it myself. A lot of those things tie back to sense of self, sense of worth, things that were learned in childhood or, in later relationship experience. So really looking inward anytime you're being triggered, in that way or feeling like you wanna clam up, and look, there are certain times where you need to assess, is this a safe person? More often than not, we know that it is a safe person, and so if it is a safe person, it's about the awareness, number 1, why am I resisting this? If you're with somebody trusted, and then number 2, giving yourself that kindness and grace that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay that things are imperfect and you're going through a rough time. You're not a burden to anybody. We are here for connection. We are here for community. And especially during times of big crisis. Well, like, think about it this way, we had these horrific fires in Southern California a year ago. So, what are you supposed to do? Like, "Oh, my house burned down. I'm not gonna talk to anybody about it. I'm not gonna, like, deal with it with my neighbors." No, we're stronger together.
Yeah, and also, the joy that you're giving that friend of being able to support you.
Yeah.
When I hear that, "Oh, just talking with you, it was only, like, maybe 30 minutes, but it just helped me so much, and thank you so much," makes my day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of joy and reward and fulfillment that people get from helping other people. It's been shown in happiness studies as well. You mentioned volunteering, that when we can be of service to others and have some purpose, some higher calling in life in that way, even if it's on a small scale,
Mm,
it helps a lot. So you can think of it as, okay, I'm not burdening them, but I'm giving them the opportunity to feel joy.
mhm. Absolutely right. It's you know, we're in this to get through things together, and not only, does it benefit other people, but that's how our relationships deepen. That's how they grow. That's how we evolve and those friendships evolve.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, if anyone is going through the like early stages of divorce to where, they haven't signed off on those dotted lines that are going to impact them negatively on a long-term basis, what advice do you have or what do you want them to hear or know about these early stages?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So, we don't negotiate anything about money if we don't know anything about money, right? So that's the headline number 1. I think there is a real kind of fear of not coming to the table with your worth, knowing what you want. Again, before you start the negotiation process of divorce is really, really important. And depending on where you are in the timeline of your life, you're going to be looking at different things in different ways. And what I mean by that is, for my clients who are in their 30s, they have time to whether the financial changes that are coming their way, whether it's for the immediate financial future or for the long-term financial future. And then when I'm working with clients who are more in their 40s and 50s, you have a lot less time. So making sure that you're taking into consideration retirement, making sure that you're, splitting those kind of assets, making sure that you're not taking on big financial commitments like a property without having done all of the planning for every possible expense and then putting that into a projected after divorce budget to make sure that you can cover those costs, right? So basically, and this is just like surface stuff. I get really in the weeds on this stuff, which I love. And I also share that any decision you make during the negotiation process, you should put through what I call the 555 rule, which is examining the issue at hand and then going through the paces of, if I make this decision, how is it going to affect me in 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. So, really kind of taking that time to be thoughtful because all the decisions that you're going to be making during negotiations have a lasting effect, right? And the thing about divorce is there's no do over, where I guess technically there could be, but it would be incredibly expensive and it's usually not winnable. So do it right the first time, which is why when we were talking about the beginning of the conversation, even if you have that inclination of, I just want to bury my head in the sand, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I just want to shut down, please don't do that because you're going to be making decisions that a judge is going to stamp that you're going to have to live by later. So this is the only time to really assess what is going to work for you and what's not.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was just scratching the surface, but great advice. Yeah, to make it from a grounded place too. So,
Yeah.
all right, Alex. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's such useful information, helpful information. My job is to try to keep people together, but it doesn't always work. So, your job is kind of the handoff of what do you do when marriage does not work out?
That's
And you
exactly right.
brought such practical tools for keeping your head on straight so that you don't make any decisions you're going to regret. So I know your website is thedivorceplanner.net, the divorce planner, one word, .net. And tell us about your book that's coming out. You have a book that's going in the works, right?
Yes, I'm so excited. I am under contract with Josie Bass Wiley Books, and I'm working on a book that's going to be coming out in January 2027 entitled The Divorce Prep Guide 8 Weeks to Divorce Ready.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, we'll hear more about that in the coming year, but I really appreciate you being here and we'll see you online.
Thank you so much, Kim.